Up next, we're going to hear from investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick, who's going to bring us the very latest on George Gibney's status in the United States and whether or not he could be extradited to Ireland. The former Irish swimming coach was accused of 27 counts of indecent assault and unlawful carnal knowledge, but he avoided conviction following a Supreme Court ruling in 1993 before relocating to the other side of the Atlantic. Here's an interview which we did with the former Olympian Gary O'Toole in January of 2018. He talks here about an uncomfortable encounter that he had with George Gibney during a trip to the United States when he was just 10 years old. At some point along the way, in retrospect, it's clear that you would have been one of the swimmers that George Gibney was grooming.
Yeah, and that happened on that trip. On that trip, I got terribly homesick, as one would when you're out there for 5 weeks. And I remember breaking down and crying and just saying, I want to go home. And he comforted me as one would expect an adult person in that kind of a situation. And then I went to bed and I felt fine. But later on that night, he snuck into my bedroom and he sat on the edge of the bed and he said, "Oh, are you feeling okay now?" And I said, "I'm feeling fine now. I brought you up this apple." And he put this apple on the sideboard. And then he said, "Do you want me to, are you sure you're okay? Do you need any more comfort?" And I don't know what it was, but immediate alarm bells went off and I said, "I'm fine. I think you should leave now." And he left. And that was the in for him. That was the opportunity. The vulnerability was there. He knew that I liked him praising me, and he went his way. And, you know, the next day I was fine. He started counting down to coming home. And I didn't think it was in any way odd that had gone on. And I didn't put two and two together until a long, long time later. I didn't realize that that's what was potentially that it could have resulted in, you know, a catastrophic personal outcome for me from that.
Maybe we'll spool forward to the bit where the penny does begin to drop, I guess, when you're actually told by a teammate that George Gibney had been abusing him. Obviously he picks you because he thinks he's going to find someone who he trusts and who will give him a sympathetic ear. How quickly do you go, okay, yeah, like I fully understand exactly, I can see that?
When he sat down and he spoke to me, it was on a long haul flight, and he asked me whether I had ever, whether anything inappropriate had, you know, this whole terminology that people use, anything inappropriate, whether I had, whether George Gibney had ever done anything to me that I felt uncomfortable with. And I just said, no, not at all. And then I said, "Why are you asking me these questions? Why did something happen to you?" And then it just came out. It was like turning on a tap at full pace. And he got he spoke for about 2 hours about what had gone on. And then he said to me, "Now you got to keep that to yourself. You know, I just wanted to tell you that." And I said, "I can't."
Yeah, we'll put the full link up to that interview if you want to do it if you want to watch it as a refresher, and the role that Gary O'Toole played in just making the George Gibney story public. Here's part one of our interview, though, that we're going to bring you right up to date on what the story is with Gibney now. The investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick has been covering this case for a long time and has really been one of the few people in the world who has kept the pressure up to see if there's a possibility that maybe at some point in the future George Gibney might be brought back to Ireland to face some justice. Here he is, and why there could be some significant developments in the story in the coming months.
Okay, so we're revisiting the story of George Gibney, the former Irish swimming coach, the Olympic swimming coach. He was accused of 27 counts of indecent assault and unlawful carnal knowledge before he escaped conviction following a Supreme Court ruling in 1993. And delighted to say we've got Irvin Muchnick, American journalist, back with us on the show, and he's been following the Gibney case closely over the past few years, and he has got a new ebook out right now, and you can get it on Amazon. It's called The George Gibney Chronicles: What the Hunt for the Most Notorious At-Large Sex Criminal in the History of Global Sports has told us about the sports establishments and governments on 2 continents. Irvin, you're very welcome to the show. How are you?
Very good, Owen. Good to be here.
So let's start at the top here, the movements to extradite George Gibney. It's a constant one. It's one we've spoken to you about on the show before. And one of the lines that really sticks out to me from the book in the opening couple of pages is that 2019 will be the year of reckoning on this. What gives you that sense?
Well, a few things have come together. There's been no shortage of institutional memory and public knowledge of the Gibney case in Ireland, but not so in the United States, where Gibney has been hiding in plain sight for now going on a quarter of a century. The three things that have happened that I believe have made 2019 the key year in the hunt for Gibney. First of all, in 2010, Irish-American activist Evan Daly, who founded the group One Child International in Florida, pressured Gibney in a way that seemed to force his hand, made him panic and apply for American citizenship. The second thing that happened was my Freedom of Information Act case against the Department of Homeland Security and the American government, which, while it didn't bring us all the smoking guns that many of us would like in the Gibney story, did smoke out the American government to reveal what happened in 2010 when Gibney applied for citizenship. And what happened was that he was denied citizenship on the grounds that he lied on his application about his criminal indictment in Ireland. He concealed it. But on the other hand, the American government decided that he was not a candidate for removal from the country because he had never been convicted of a crime. So this is a kind of catch-22. What's happening in 2019 is that all of this is playing out in the backdrop of widespread sexual abuse scandals in America, most notably in USA Gymnastics, but also other Olympic swimming groups, USA Swimming, USA Taekwondo, and others. And so there is a general new awareness as a result of that, as a result of the Me Too movement and other factors. And then finally, you have Donald J. Trump in the White House, who is not popular in certain circles, but he does have a Jones about getting rid of undesirables from the United States. Now, often that plays out to the detriment of Muslims and Central Americans, not so much with respect to white Europeans, but the confluence of circumstances seem to be ripe to make the American government mobilize to get rid of some bad actors, and Gibney seems to be in the crosshairs. My sources say this will play out in a matter of months. It's a predictive statement by me. It's not a slam dunk. I think it's going to happen in 2019. We all shall see.
Reading the book, you make the point that this case has barely made ripples over in the United States. But, as you mentioned there, a couple of the things, the Me Too movement, the Larry Nassar case, has basically created the opposite ripple movement, where I presume there's more journalists, more political figures looking into other cases like this and looking into people who really should not be safe in that country or should not have a safe haven in areas around the United States. How is this going to play out? Is there going to be political figures like Jackie Spire, who Maureen OSullivan was over meeting last year, or will there be new figures in the mix? What's your read in the situation?
Well, my read is that I don't believe that the dynamics that will lead to George Gibney's extradition for trial in Ireland directly relate to the efforts of TD Maureen OSullivan, who has reached out to Congresswoman Jackie Speier and others. Now, those efforts can't hurt, but I actually think that it's an independent set of circumstances that involve scandals in USA Swimming that a task force of federal agents are investigating, and that George Gibney is an offshoot of those investigations and is a fairly easy, low cost, high yield target for them. Essentially, after decades and decades of escaping accountability in the small country of Ireland and in the large country of the United States, things have finally lined up to where Gibney could be chum in the water. That's the hope, and that's my expectation based on the information that I have from American government sources.
The information that you have is very interesting as well, that you actually have printed in the book. And I guess it's no harm to actually chart the story of George Gibney in the United States. And one of the things is the golden ticket he got, for lack of a better term, from the diversity lottery visa. And there seems to be a discrepancy around the timing around this, Irvin. This isn't something that I was too aware of. We're not quite sure when he actually got his golden ticket.
Right. There's about a 6 or 7 year window when a lot of things happened, and we know the order in which the things happened, but we don't know exactly how they interplayed. He may have gotten a Donnelly Diversity Lottery visa as early as the late 1980s. Now, around December of 1990 is when Gibney's Irish swimming empire began to crumble, when Chalky White confided in Gary O'Toole on a plane trip to Sydney, Australia for a world swimming meet. And then early the next year, Gibney starts losing various titles and positions in Irish swimming. And in June of 1991, on a training trip with the Trojans team out of the New Park Comprehensive School in County Dublin, Blackrock, he has the incident that I call his one known sex crime on American soil, where he rapes and impregnates a teen swimmer whom he had previously assaulted, evidently in Holland. And so at that point, Gibney is no longer the Irish Olympic head swimming coach, evidently, although the timeline of that is also murky. And in 1992, he, if I have this timeline exactly right, he gets a letter or a certificate of character from an Irish Garda precinct that says he's clean, he has no criminal record. But it's at the moment when allegations are surfacing and his indictment is imminent. In 1993, Gibney is indicted on these 27 counts that you mentioned, and his barrister challenges the indictment on grounds that the allegations go so far back in time that they compromise his right to a fair trial. And in 1994, the Irish Supreme Court agrees with this position and invalidates the prosecution of Gibney. Shortly after that, he goes to a coaching position in Scotland, and from there to the United States to just outside Denver, Colorado in 1994. And somewhere in there, there's a recommendation letter or a job offer letter, I should say, from an unknown a swimming organization or swimming club in America that says we would like to have you as the coach. We don't know if that's the same team that actually hired him, the North Jeffco Hurricanes in Arvada, Colorado, but that's the known timeline at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I bring it up because I do wonder if this is going to be part of any investigations that may be coming down the line this year. And the North Jeffco swim team is interesting. I'm sure you've been in touch with them yourself, and I've been in touch with them, and they said that the current team administration and coaching staff were hired after George Gibney's release from the team. They never met Gibney or had any contact with him, and therefore no information even on a tertiary level. At the time, the team was operated through the North Jeffco Parks and Rec department, but since then we have separated and evolved into an individual not-for-profit 501c3 entity. You may have more success obtaining information by contacting the Parks and Rec organisation, or department, I should say. Like, is this the sort of tone you tend to get when you're contacting all these different areas of the United States, when they may or may not be linked to George Gibney, or may not be offering jobs to somebody who they may believe to be innocent?
Well, I don't know about the believe he's innocent part, although who can know the hearts and minds of people you ask about these things. There's the legal side of the George Gibney story, and there's like the more challenging moral or, public citizen side of the George Gibney story. And the way I describe it is, it takes a village. It takes a village to allow a George Gibney to hide in plain sight across numerous states in America, ultimately, and I believe to this moment, in the state of Florida, with people denying, knowing only what they directly know, having no curiosity about somebody who is plainly a bad guy and should not be exposed to children and should almost certainly be in prison. And so that's part of the frustration of everybody who investigates this kind of story, and it's been the frustration of numerous Irish journalists across decades, and it's been mine since I took up the cause in 2015. With respect to North Jeffco, yes, these are coaches who weren't there at the time, but they told me to go to the recreation district, which I did, and got a lot of double talk from them. Their diligent search through their own archives to give us any formal or informal information that might help us patch together this narrative has left something to be desired, in my humble opinion.
Right. Like, do you think there will be an appetite to try and find out how somebody like George Gibney gets a job in a place like North Jeffco, or potentially jobs elsewhere as well in the United States? Because we've spoken at the top here about the fight for extradition and the fight for deportation in terms of George Gibney, but after that you've got everything that's left behind. How did a society allow someone like George Gibney to thrive in a foreign country?
Right, and Owen, what you've just encapsulated is the reason that I've been doing what I do. Now, obviously, there are many Gibney victims, and they deserve justice, and we all want to see that play out. But I talk about Irish Gibney world and American Gibney world, and it's really swim world and sports world where we deny, deflect, don't want to know the unpleasant things behind giving us 2 or 3 weeks of feel-good entertainment on national television with a patriotic bent every 4 years, every leap year summer. So that's really what I'm after, and to me, the ultimate outrageousness of Gibney is not just Gibney himself, and not just the Irish swimming establishment in enabling Gibney, but this second stage American enabling of Gibney, first giving him a coaching position in the United States, and then after he was outed finally here and went underground to a life of great lack of settlement and movement and different jobs that were outside the swimming industry. No interest in piecing together the story and bring to account the people who enabled his odyssey and making sure that it never happens again. And the number one suspect in all this is the American Swimming Coaches Association, which post-Gibney has had an increased presence in Ireland through coaching clinics and other programs. But Judge Charles R. Breyer, in my Freedom of Information Act case, did go out of his way to say that Muchnick suspects that the American Swimming Coaches Association greased the wheels for Gibney's relocation. And that's the story that I want to impress upon my fellow Americans as we try to close the loop on the legal story of Gibney's prosecution. That's a rather grim prospect indeed, if that was the case.
Yeah, we're getting an update here on the latest developments in the George Gibney case from the investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick, who's obviously done great work on this story over the last number of years, as you can tell from this piece. During the next passage, Irvin discusses his dealings with ASCA. We've removed the name of the individual from the organisation who he corresponded with, but otherwise this piece remains intact. Have a look.
I presume you've been in touch with ASCA many, many times. Has there ever been any response from them that may shed some further light on whether or not they did grease those wheels?
Well, I corresponded with in 2012, and then he cut me off when I had the indelicacy to actually publish what he said to me, which is that the ASCA is not an organization that deals directly with children in any way, shape, or form. And think of the how ludicrous that statement is. If you had a complaint against a pediatrician who had treated your child and went to the American Academy of Pediatrics and heard back that we're just a doctor's professional association and we have nothing to do with children in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, the aquatics industry, a supermajority of its activities and its commerce involve non-adults in teaching how to swim and in coaching them. And this position by is not tenable in my view. That's sort of where things stood until last year.
Yeah, so Irvin continues to tell Owen that last year a British journalist claimed to have documents exonerating the ASCA official in question. When asked by Irvin, he didn't produce these documents and deleted the website where they had been discussed. Here's the final part of our chat with the investigative reporter Irvin Muchnick.
To say that I am very skeptical of any defense of ASCA in this matter is a great understatement. And then, of course, there's USA Swimming itself. That is the national sport governing body under the Amateur Sports Act here. It's an affiliate of USA Swimming out of Colorado Springs. Gibney must have been a member of USA Swimming during his brief tenure as a coach in Colorado. So how did that happen? The late Chuck Wilgus, who was the longtime CEO of USA Swimming, made what I think is the typical deflection response when asked about Gibney in a deposition in one of the many lawsuits by coach abuse victims in USA Swimming. And he said something along the lines of, Gibney, I think I've heard the name. What, is that Irish or something? I mean, just complete insults to our intelligence. George Gibney was a two-time national swim team head coach. He is well known in the swimming community. He's one of many international bad actors who've gone not just program to program, not just state to state or province to province, but country to country. And he is emblematic of a much larger issue in how USA Swimming treats or fails to treat the safety of the youth athletes under their charge.
What is the motivation for looking after George Gibney or helping him out in the United States?
I think it's just minimizing embarrassment and reputational damage.
But in the first place,
I'm not sure that George Gibney has anything on the leadership of USA Swimming or ASCA, but this is just what they do. This is cultural. It's ingrained. I have to add that it's not just the leadership of swimming. It's not just the swimming coaches. It's the parents. It's the athletes. It's the expectations. It's the money. It's the chase of glory and celebrity. It's all of these things that make us, that should give us pause, make us think a little bit more about how we manage and run and execute what are really extracurricular programs that involve hundreds of thousands of young athletes in the United States, only a very few of whom even have direct aspirations for college scholarships or Olympic gold medals or anything of the sort. And yet the way our youth sports system is set up with its economies of scale, the families of ordinary swimmers or people who are trying to learn life skills subsidize these high-powered, win-at-all-costs, money-hungry aspirations that help create the climate for sexual abuse and sexual abuse cover-up.
And when it comes to the cover-up and to handling this abuse and moving on beyond it, we've seen, I guess, a name change and things like that when it comes to the IASA becoming Swim Ireland over here. But I guess my point is in the initial case, why is George Gibney being looked after in the United States? I can see why, I guess, there may be a rush to try and brush up their act because they've realised they've made a mistake, perhaps, bringing him into the country. But in the first place, that's what I'm really curious about here, Irvin. There's clearly something at play here, the real motivation for allowing George Gibney to become a safe operator in the United States of America, which is very, very curious.
I agree that it's very, very curious. I think we don't have the evidence to answer that question yet, which is why I speculate on very broad-based cultural, institutional protection grounds. There could be a specific circumstance or piece of knowledge of the connection of Gibney to certain American players that constitutes leverage, but I don't know of that, and until such point as we actually get the job offer letter, which I wasn't able to get in unredacted form through my court action, but hopefully at some point in the future, whether by a person of conscience within the American Swimming Coaches Association or somewhere else through the court processes, we will get more evidence than we have right now to answer that question.
Is there a safe sport investigation currently underway?
There is a safe sport investigation, checking all the boxes. I advised TD O'Sullivan to put through a formal request for a safe sport investigation in the United States on two grounds. One, that Gibney was evidently a sanctioned coach here for a brief period in 1995. And number two, because one of his acts, whether it was at the point when he was an American coach or not, and he was not an American coach, he was an Irish coach, there was an incident, an allegation, which I think is more than an allegation if you read the Murphy report in 1998 in Ireland. So U.S. Center for Safe Sport did take up that case. It is in their system. I don't know what the status of it is. The U.S. Center for Safe Sport is a new agency that came out of the scandals in recent years, and it's understaffed, it's overwhelmed, its independence is questionable because all of its funding comes from the national sport governing bodies and their sponsors. I see it as the same old group of bureaucrats who've been moved around into different positions, and I don't have a high level of confidence that they're going to do anything of substance or great moment on Gibney. But to answer your question succinctly, yes, at TD O'Sullivan's request in 2018, there is a current active investigation by the U.S. Center for Safe Sport.
Just kind of on a final point then, just you mentioned Maureen OSullivan there. Is she still active in this in terms of trying to move the case further month after month after month? Because it seemed like we had a few developments last year, a few developments in 2017, but over the last maybe, 6 to 12 months, really things have gone a little bit quiet on this. Is this as a result of your information that things are set to move forward in 2019, or have we kind of reached the end of our tether to a certain extent in what we can do here in Ireland?
Well, Maureen OSullivan has been fantastic. I mean, she's a grand lady. She's kept the flame alive on this starting in 2015. As you know, there have been several iterations of Irish campaigns to get Gibney, and she deserves all the credit for supporting the most recent one. We're at the point in this story, Owen, where the Irish have done what they can do. It's the ball is in the court of the Americans to get rid of this guy who's had a safe haven. As Judge Breyer said in my case, we are not a haven for pedophiles. And what we need to find out now is whether that's a principle that obtains in the breach or in the observance. And it's time to observe that and look at Gibney. There's a bit of an Alphonse and Gaston act by the Irish and American governments where the Irish don't want to ask for extradition until they know he's going to be deported. And the Americans don't want to deport him unless they know that something is going to happen at the other end. But I think that, as I said, I believe, I hope, and I expect that in the year 2019, the Americans are going to take the steps to get Gibney sent back to Ireland and tried for his many crimes against young people. And that's where we stand right now. And we owe our thanks to a long line of Irish journalists like Justine McCarthy and Johnny Watterson. We owe it to whistleblowers like Chalky White, who was a victim, and Gary O'Toole, who is not a victim, but who mobilized the community of victims in a very effective way. We owe it to Evan Daly in Florida, and we owe it to the judge who did some of the right things in my Freedom of Information Act case to bring this scenario to light in the broad and in the round so that we can take action that's effective moving forward.
And of course, that judge would not have been in the position to bring those things to light unless you made that request yourself. So well done on your work, Irvin. And the new book is called The George Gibney Chronicles. It's available on ebook, as I said at the top. Amazon, is it available on your website as well?
It is. Well, if people don't have a Kindle-friendly device and want just to get a PDF copy of it, they can send the PayPal funds to me, and I'll send it out to them by email in PDF form.
Good stuff. And you can check out the rest of Irvin's work on Concussion Inc. That's concussioninc.net if you want any more. And I'm sure there'll be more on the George Gibney case over the coming months and years. Irvin Muchnick, thank you so much for taking the call.
Thank you, Owen. My pleasure.